like, I don't know anything can happen, so put this here. Tip of the butt. Right, okay. Right, so today we're going to be working on how the mind works and positivity, which I think is a good start. I've seen most of you before, but not all of you. So if we've not met, I'm Jeffrey, and I'm a sports psychology consultant that works with a range of different teams and individuals in all sports, right from grassroots level to international professional standard as well. And Paul and I agreed to work on a few topics in these group workshops for everyone. So there are just general areas of sports psychology, and we're going to try and raise a little bit of awareness regarding these areas, and then also give you a mental skill to go and use when you're training, when you're playing matches, but also just life in general, I think, which will be good. So we're going to learn about how the mind works and a bit of positivity today. And if there's time at the end, we might go over some performance goals, but if there's no time for that, we'll just leave that to the next one. We didn't have time for that in the last one because there was some good discussion, which is important. So with that in mind, I don't really want this to be like a lecture. It's not like, it shouldn't be like a lecture. I would much rather it being very discussion based. Sound good? Yeah? Okay. So we're going to learn about how the mind works when we play. We're going to learn how to effectively reframe negative thoughts, and we might have time to go into performance goals, depending on how things are going. But it's important in terms of sports psychology that you learn how your mind works. Because you learn about how your body works and how it moves and things like that when you learn skills and you learn techniques and you learn tactics. And you also learn how to build up muscle, etc. and condition yourselves. So the same thing happens in sports psychology. When you start to train your mind, it's important that you understand how it works. And essentially I would say that learning how the mind works and doing what we're going to be doing today is one of the most important things, because it makes everything thereafter a little bit easier, because you understand yourself a little bit more and how your brain works in association to certain things that go on in squash and life. So we'll talk about the sporting mind first. So you all know that the mental side's important. You've got your tactical, your physical, your technical. But the mental side's somewhat left out. But it's really important, and I'm sure you'll have all seen it in action on the court, where you're playing really well, and so is your opponent, and it's really just the head that decides the win and the loss. In terms of how negative you're being or how positive you're being, how confident or underconfident you are, etc., etc. Nerves, handling pressure, different things like that. So when we begin to work on how the mind works when we compete, it's important to think about the situations that we're in. And I would say it's important to initially identify some negative situations, because we don't really need to pay as much attention. We're actually really good at being positive when good situations are happening. So when we're playing really well, things are going our way, we're constantly up, it's very easy for us to be positive. But it's harder for us to be positive when negative situations occur. Do you agree? Yeah. So we need to be identifying some negative situations. So this is where it goes over to you guys a little bit. What are some negative situations in squash? Training, competition, before, during and after, whatever.
I would say it's in a tournament. I found if then kind of a match after the match affect me too much. Like if I have a good performance, it's fine.
Yeah.
But at the time's sake, especially the kind of first match, you have a negative performance and not letting that dictate the rest of it. Like, I think you still have to reflect on it, or like spending that like a shorter amount of time reflecting on it, and then kind of think about the next match, kind of a new situation.
Okay, so a negative situation would be losing a match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of let
Okay.
it snowball into the rest of it.
Exactly, yeah. If you don't do anything about these, or your thoughts in relation to these negative situations, it could snowball for sure. What are some other ones?
I feel like the one that's worse for me as well. I feel as if I'm playing well and then I make an easy mistake when I've created quite a good opportunity,
Yeah,
and then I just overthink that mistake, and then like trying to get out of that mindset's a bit difficult for me.
absolutely, yeah. And no matter how hard you try, you just feel like you're stuck.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you do to try and get out?
Just like take a bit longer before I like start between points,
Mm-hmm.
and just try and go through what went wrong. Usually it's just I was too casual when I'm taking that winning shot.
Sure. Okay.
That's my thing.
Good. Any more?
Just like when you go on like you start to go on a run of losing points.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can just let it like slip away before you can know you've lost 5 7 points.
Exactly. Over the course of like 2 minutes,
Yeah.
which can be really, really frustrating. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. Anything else?
Because the nerves kind of come into it for me.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of situations brings around those nerves?
Probably first match in tournament, it was a big tournament.
Yeah.
Kind of, I felt that kind of affects my performance. Kind of feel a bit nervous. Kind of lets that affect me too much.
That's good. Yeah. Well, it's not good for you, but it's a good example.
Yeah, it's come a wee bit, kind of go my shell a wee bit,
Sure.
and kind of probably not play the way I should be on court.
Absolutely.
Come a wee bit defensive.
Sure. And we're going to explain how and why all of these things happen as well. So here are some situations that I've got. Lose an important point, we can mention that. Poor start to the match. All right, I think that often happens where you're feeling good, you're feeling pumped up, you're not that nervous before you go on, you maybe lose 4 out of the first 5 points, and then you just struggle to get back into it from there. It's not necessarily how you're playing. You could be playing well, your opponent just could be playing a little bit better, or just luck might not be on your side. But a poor start to the match, you often hear people saying, I just didn't have that great a start, and I didn't really get into it. Yeah. But it doesn't need to be like that. You still can get into it, but it's just harder to deal with when we don't know how to deal with it. Losing a tight set. It might not be in terms of frustration or anger, just a little bit disappointing. You can see that slip away from you.
Yeah, like, especially if you have like game balls and then like throw them away.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like annoying.
Exactly. Well, it's interesting you say throw it away, because you might not have thrown. If you lost a point earlier on in the game, you wouldn't explain it as throwing it away. But because it's the point that's more important, you describe it as that actually where there's probably not much difference in what you did. But you're a bit harder on yourself because it is that situation. Which is, yeah, that's interesting. Nice. Opponent gains momentum, or just a momentum shift in general. What do you guys think of that one?
Happens, but
I think it can.
sorry. Because like there's sometimes where you're like on the ball, hitting it so well, and you can't really make a mistake, and then your opponent will do the same, and then you just feel like you're in a negative situation trying to overcome that.
Yeah,
It's quite difficult.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think in sports like the momentum can change very quickly. So just if you're on top, you're like putting a lot of pressure on them. But then you make a mistake, that like completely changes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
Uh,
Rally as well can happen. Like
Exactly, and being aware of your thoughts and being aware of your feelings, and actually being able to control them can really help with that momentum change. Because even though you've missed a point, yeah, naturally your opponent can gain momentum, but you don't need to lose that momentum as much. But when you start to think negatively about these situations, that's when momentum can start to dip. Cool. Unfair or unlucky call from the ref or the opponents. How often does that happen? Does it happen often?
Yeah, sometimes.
Which can be quite frustrating.
Especially with the refs and stuff.
This video is going out to the referees as well. But yeah, a frustrating one because it's completely out with your control, and there's literally nothing you can do about it. But a lot of people struggle to move on from it, and it can affect points thereafter as well. 2 sets down. Yeah. What can happen at 2 sets down?
Yeah, the turn around the one you just.
Things all down to mindset.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a big one, especially in that situation.
You might like find yourself in a position where like you don't have a clue what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's quite a big situation just in terms of what may or may not happen thereafter. I think, and it all stems from your thoughts in relation to it and how you perceive the situation, right?
Because they've only got one game to win, whereas they've got 3.
Yeah. So if you go in thinking that,
Yeah.
performance might not be up to scratch.
Yeah.
You could be, well, see if you go in with that, how do you think you're going to feel?
Nah, I don't like personally 2 sets down doesn't really get them as much as other things.
That's
I don't
good.
mind that, but
Yeah.
yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I can't if you just think they've got less to go. You're not going to move around.
Yeah, you might feel a little bit demotivated from that, for sure. That's definitely something that I used to think about. They're at this stage and I'm at this stage.
Yeah.
They've got a lot less to go. If I'm going to win, I need to come back and do lots here. And at that time, it just kind of made not fully give up, but just be a bit like,
Yeah.
you know, and be a little bit flat, and I would never just come back into the match. But like you said, you're not like that, and what kind of things would you be thinking at that moment in time?
I've got to try and put some work into the legs and then try and win on like fitness and stuff.
Which is good. And how does that make you feel at the time?
Like, I've got a good chance of getting this back. Like sometimes I don't know, a few times I've been 2 sets down to someone and I really shouldn't be 2 sets down to,
Mm-hmm.
and I do maybe come back and win. But it's just because I feel as if, like, I don't know, it's a bit of an adverse position, but I can get out of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't know when the last time I won from 2 sets.
When you won from 2 sets down?
Yeah, it's just a fall.
I think it's different. If you go on, if you believe you can beat someone, I think that kind of helps sometimes. Because even if you are 2 sets down, you kind of think, well, I know I can win 3, so.
Yep.
I try and sometimes think that best when 2 go down, trying to think it's going to love all, and then just trying to win 3 now.
Sure.
Kind of makes it a wee bit
That's good.
easier.
Again, it all stems from what you think about the situation, what you're thinking at that moment in time in relation to it. Yeah, that's really good. Against a stronger opponent, again, there could be, it depends on the way you think about this. What are the 2 ways you could think about? It's a positive way and a negative way to think about playing against a stronger opponent.
You can show them what you're made of.
Yeah.
And
So nothing to
Yeah.
lose mentality.
like,
Yeah.
Whereas if you just go in and you know you're going to lose, so you don't even like try too hard.
Exactly. Yeah. Or not even not trying too hard, but if you go on knowing you're going to lose, then I guess you play without that extra confidence that you really need to go and execute what you want to execute as well.
Yeah, you're just gonna let them dictate it. You too much.
Exactly, yeah, for sure. We've got up against someone you lost to before. It can happen a lot in Scotland where you play against each other all the time. And well, how do you guys feel about playing people that maybe you win or lose to quite consistently?
I don't know. It depends what it is. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like sometimes you could have a bad loss against someone and then you know that next time you should be fine against them.
Yeah,
But like, if it's very tight, sometimes it's a bit nerve-wracking.
yeah,
Because you know you could maybe win.
yeah,
But you've got to play well.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think sometimes it was against someone you lost to before, and you know you should be beaten. Kind of give you extra motivation. Kind of go on and prove that it was a bad loss, and not.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. Again, what's the common theme here? It all stems from what you think
Yeah.
at the time, right? And naturally, you can either think about it in a positive way, like you in that situation where you're 2 sets down, or you can think about a situation like being against a stronger opponent in a negative way by going, there's just no point in this because he's going to win easily, right? So again, it's all down to the way you think about it and having a bad training session, which can be really frustrating, especially maybe in the lead up to the week of the tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's the way that you think about it.
Sometimes I think like playing not well going into a tournament can be a good thing though. It's like you're not expecting much, you know.
Yeah, sure,
Like you can only like improve.
absolutely. So again, it's the way you think about it. So with that in mind, if you have a bad training session on the Thursday and you're not going to be training again before the tournament on the Saturday, you could say to yourself, you could be thinking, I got all of the bad shots out of the way there, that's good,
Yeah.
right? Or you could be thinking, oh my God, I was playing so shit there, that could happen again on Saturday. Those are two very different responses to a bad training session that can really have two very different outcomes at the end in terms of your performance. So essentially, I wouldn't even say that these are negative situations.
It's just how you perceive it.
Yeah, right? It's just how you perceive them. It's just the way that you think about them can make them negative. They're actually just common occurrences, right? You're always going to have a bad training session here and there. There's always going to be someone that's stronger than you when you come up against them. A lot of the time, you're going to play to someone you've lost to before. There's always going to be unfair and unlucky calls. You're going to lose tight sets, you're going to lose important points, you're going to have poor starts to the match, and there's always, every single match is going to have momentum switches. So it's important that you have awareness of your thoughts in relation to these things. Because, like I said, that can just affect what happens thereafter. Make sense? Yeah? Any questions before we move on? Yeah. This is all what we're going to be doing today, and in future group workshops as well. It's all simple stuff. You'll be able to understand it no problem. The most important part is actually applying it and putting it in. Because, yeah, it's all easy to understand. It all makes sense. My philosophy as a sports psychology consultant is that you guys know the answers already. I'm just there to get them out and help you use them. Because you do. You do know the answers already. It's just about finding a way to use them on court to help your performance, right? So, yeah, it's not these situations that give us the negative feelings and emotions. It's our reaction to them. So it's how we think about them. Yeah? Because all those situations in the slide before, I'm not going through, I need to. All these situations can happen and will happen, and everyone will have different reactions to them. So it's not actually the situations that bring on our negative feelings and emotions. It's how we think about them. And we will think about these situations differently to one another. So it's important that you build up that self-awareness, which you, like you said, you've identified when you think really well about things or think quite negatively about things as well. And it's important that we need to build upon that. All right? So, I mean, the examples like John McEnroe, you know John McEnroe? Yeah. And he used to go off his head, and I'm sure you've seen all of the videos. And a lot of it would be maybe to be like bad line calls and things like that, or and that can then go on to easy misses and lots of different things, which happen to almost every tennis player.
Yeah.
But he was the only one that did that. Now you do get some others, but not to that extent. So, and it was his reaction that was building that up and making him like that. It was the way that he was thinking about the situation. He wasn't effectively moving on from it. So with that in mind, we've got to realise that it's actually our brains that are just doing their job. But we don't need them to do it anymore. Now, this might be a long shot, but what do you think that means? Anyone? What do you think I mean by our brains are just doing their job, but we don't need them to do it anymore?
Like, it's just like sometimes like a natural reaction, but you have to like try and overcome that thinking.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Our brains are programmed, and always have been programmed, to fixate on the negatives in order to keep us safe, right? So back in the caveman era, right, a lot has changed between then and now in terms of physical appearance. We've become taller, we've become stronger, we've become smarter because we've had the utilities to become smarter, but our brain hasn't actually changed in terms of what it's there for. It's there to keep us safe. So back then, keeping it safe, our brains would be used for, if we're hunting, for example, and we then come across some danger, we see a lion, our brain's going, Jesus, you're gonna die, right? Get out of here. It's a negative thought, right? It's a natural negative thought. We would still do it. We would still have it if a lion came through that door just now, because that's our brain doing a good job. It's programmed to keep us safe and fixate on negatives. But we don't have that danger anymore. So our dangers are actually losing the match, or losing the set, or what are some other examples of the dangers that you're in now?
Getting a bad draw.
Getting a bad draw, yeah.
Making easy mistakes.
Making these, yeah, all of these are essentially what we would consider as high performers now dangerous, right? Which actually kind of sad when you think about it. That's what we consider dangerous now compared to like a lion, right? But it's all about context, right? And of course those are worrying things now for us. So when you are being negative, and when you do say negative things to yourself in relation to the situations that we saw before, it's actually your brain doing its job. But because it's not dangerous, we don't actually need to listen to that automatic negative thought. We need to talk to ourselves and do something about it, which is what we're going to learn next. Does that make sense still? Yeah? Happy with that? Okay. So you'll see in your sheets in front of you as well that this cycle is there. We don't need to write anything, but it could be a good idea to write notes in relation to maybe what this means to you, because it will mean something different to everyone. But just taking a look at that just now, does it make sense? Who wants to explain it?
Kind of explains itself. Kind of thoughts. And it probably thoughts and feelings probably can go into the same thing sometimes. Like, I say nerves, quite good. Like, if I'm looking at that, probably my nerves coming into it. Probably nerves. If I thought the player was a lot better than me, yeah, I'd become nervous. And that affects my performance then, because I'm just kind of going in my shell.
Sure.
And then
So that's a good example of maybe the cycle in a negative way. And what happens when you go into your shell?
Then I just think, probably then it becomes thoughts that I'm not playing very well, I've gone into my shell too much.
And it keeps going rounds
Yeah.
and rounds and rounds, which is not what you want.
No.
But also, there can be a positive one as well. So what's a positive example?
You feel like you think or feel as if you're playing well, and then your performance like keeps.
So you think, right, okay, I'm playing well here. That maybe makes you feel confident, motivated, things like that. What happens to performance?
Like at least stays good or increases.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what can happen to your thoughts again after that?
Like just even better because you're hitting the ball.
Right? So there's both positive and negative examples, but at the end of the day, it all stems from what you think about. Yeah. And what you're thinking in relation to those situations that we spoke about. Yeah. So those are two good examples of the cycle. And it can either be naturally negative or positive. Right? So if we even, there's not a pen there. Have you got a pen to use? No, I mean for this. No, it's fine. You don't need to. It's fine, honestly. How far is it?
There's probably one there in the office. I'll just go.
Okay, yeah, why not? So right now, yeah, for you guys, the situation will dictate whether this cycle is negative or positive. But like I said before, it's not the situation that makes you feel like that, it's your thoughts.
So the thoughts would change it from a positive to a negative cycle.
Right, yeah. It's your thoughts that change it from a positive to a negative cycle, not the situations. The situations can if you don't know how to control your thoughts, which we're going to learn today. But it's your thoughts that control that. Yeah. And that cycle for me dictates lots and lots of things, including the win and the loss, but the processes that lead up to the win and the loss. So what are some processes you think? If an example of a process is momentum change or the time that you take in between points, what are some other examples that the cycle could dictate, positive and negative?
Like being hard on yourself, I don't know, just after you hit a bad shot or something, no shit.
Yeah.
That's not really happy. It's so easy to do.
Oh, nice. Wow. I don't even know what one to use. Does it reach? Am I going to? Easy. Okay. So essentially, like I said, it's naturally negative or positive just now. So say, for example, you're in a match. This is the start of the match. And that's the end of the match. Right? This will be a nice, neat example, but it won't look like this. It will probably be a bit more crazy. But naturally, the cycle will have a trajectory of that. Okay? like I said, won't look like that at all. It will more be like, right? Where, so say going up the way is positive, going down the way is negative. This will, for now, for you guys, be dictated by the situations and not your thoughts in relation to the situations, right? So, what could make the cycle go up at the start of the match?
Good start.
Good start, right? But then what happens here?
Your opponent just like turns it around a bit.
Yeah, opponents change of momentum. Cycle will go down. What could happen here? Win the first set, right? What about here? Yeah? Boom, back down again. What about here?
Good shot.
Hit a good shot, or hit a couple of good shots. Maybe win the second set, whatever. Something bad that could happen here? Ref call. Opponent wins third set. Again, lots of different things. And then lastly here, you manage to win. Something like that, right? Or you have 4 match points in a row, so naturally the cycle would be good, right? So you can see right now that it's actually these situations that are dictating the cycle, right? What we need to learn is that, again, if that's the start of the match and that's the end of the match, for these situations to still happen, because like I said, they're always going to happen, and they're not negative situations, they're just common occurrences, right? So these are still going to happen, but you keep that cycle consistent. Yeah? So it's not the situation that's going to dictate the cycle, it's your thoughts that are going to dictate the cycle. And guess what? You're in complete control of what you think. So if you're in complete control of what you think, you're in complete control of the cycle. If you're in complete control of the cycle, you can generally keep it as straight as possible. Now, in an ideal world, that's what it'll look like. But essentially what we want to aim for is that. Certainly a hell of a lot better than that. Because if this is the time of the match, then all of these times, so these situations, are going to be times where you could be playing much better, times you could be feeling much better, times you could be learning much more. Say this is training, you could be learning much more about yourself as well, things like that. Make sense? Okay, good. So this is generally, so we've gone through a couple of examples of the cycle already, which is fine. So this is generally a really simple example, right? So you have a poor start, you say to yourself, oh, I'm so rubbish, which generally people say to themselves when they make a mistake and things like that, especially if we compete at a high level. And that equals feelings of frustration, anger, and disappointment. And then that just can lead to more poor performance. Whether it's the outcome of your points can be poor, or whether it's your actions within performance. That can be down to body language, it can be down to rushing in between points, can be down to feeling tight, so not coming through your shots enough, things like that will all be affected, not just performance in general in terms of the win and the loss of points and things. Yeah? Make sense? So that's a negative example. So, like I said, your negative thoughts is your brain's natural response. That's what your brain's programmed to do. So we can't block them out. We're always going to have them. You can work on this for 1,000,000 hours and you'll still have negative thoughts. So It's about how we respond to those negative thoughts, not about blocking them out. Right? So if we look again, say we have a poor start to the match. We lose 4 of the first 5. You say to yourself, "Oh, I'm so rubbish." This is where the important bit comes. Because if we leave it like that, what's going to happen to our feelings? Right? Like the last cycle. But if we do something about it, and we reframe it, and we say, right, okay, push, I'm still in this. Now, as simple as that is, really simple. Something we don't often say to ourselves, though. We just leave the negative there. If we do this, this is the last thing that our brain registers. So we've actually manipulated the cycle. Because this is the last thing that our brain registers, it's directly linked to our feelings, which will therefore be more positive, right? So feelings of potential, you feel motivated or determined or excited, confident, enthusiastic, focused. All of these things can stem from reframing your negative thoughts into positive ones. And it is pretty much as simple as that, right? Now we do this sometimes just naturally. Say to yourself, right, okay, I should probably say something to myself. Right, come on, let's go. Something like that. But we don't do it all the time. And it's when we start to identify every negative thought that we've got, we start to reframe it into a positive one, which might be difficult at first. But if we keep doing it, 2 seconds. But it can really, really help in lots of different situations, and we'll talk about that the more we go through this. And when you have those feelings after you've reframed, performance, not just points-wise, but in terms of actions and processes in relation to performance, time you take in between points, body language, how loose you are, sticking to your tactics, all of these kind of things will be increased as well. Does that make sense? So the most important part, again, is your thoughts and what you do after you have a negative thought. How often when you're playing do you go, that was a negative thought? Right? And the first stage is being really aware of this, because it's your negative thoughts that dictate it all. Right? And it can take time. You might be like 30 seconds after, a set after, and be like, right, okay, I had a negative thought back then, and this is maybe why I've not been playing as well. But when you leave here, I want you to be so much more in tune, so much more aware of what you're saying to yourself. Naturally you will be, because you've learned about this. It's important that you keep on top of that as well. And how often do you say positive things to yourself?
Only when you're in a positive position, like if you want to
Mm-hmm.
like, take a big lead or something like that.
Yeah.
Just try and keep this up. But other than that, when you're losing, it's quite hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not even that it's hard to do.
It's not natural.
It's not natural, and we just don't really try it that much
Yeah,
as well. So, pretty simple, right? There are different ways that you can talk to yourself effectively, and that's what we're going to do just now. There's 2 main types of reframing that you can do, right? And that is a good example of the first one, push, I'm still in this. That's a good example of motivational. So what do you think motivational self-talk is?
Belief.
Yeah, so it can help give you belief.
know that you actually got a chance to win the match. Like, there's no point in stepping on court and not like feeling as if you could maybe win, because it's pointless.
Sure, yeah, it can give you that as well. Again, it's how I should talk to myself. So what is talking to yourself? It's that little voice in your head, right? And if you talk to yourself motivationally, what kind of things could you be saying to yourself? So I've described it as a short positive phrase that motivates you to keep going, to push through, that gives you motivation. All right, okay, I'll get the next one. It's all good. Right? There's nothing you can do about that. Focus on yourself. You've got this. I can do this. I'm a great player. I'm going to do it. Lots of different phrases like that we do. And it's interesting because when I asked you, nothing, which shows that we don't do it enough. Right? So in the next group workshop, I want to be asking you the same thing. You should be loads. Right? So you use motivational in different kinds of situations. What situations would you use motivational in?
I think sometimes you're gonna lose interest in something. Quite helpful there.
Yeah.
Like sometimes like if you go too long down, I sometimes use that like, oh,
Sure.
I'm obviously good enough because I've already got a set.
Yeah.
Try and motivate yourself to keep going.
That's good.
I think in both senses, if you're losing or winning, you should just go use it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's
So it-
the first one.
That's good. So it's not just about motivating yourself after negative situations, it's topping up your positivity as well. You know, that's good. And yeah, I generally say that you would use motivation individually with nothing else when you're maybe not doing anything particularly bad, but things just aren't going your way.
Like if you're going into like on a
Yeah. Yeah.
like it's spell competition.
Exactly. Because at that moment it's important to identify actually what I'm doing isn't that bad just now.
Yeah, because sometimes you can be playing like well, but then you just hit a couple of really good shots
Exactly. Yeah.
and then just win around.
That's it. So it's when you're not doing things badly, it's just when things aren't going your way. However, the other one is instructional. What could that be?
Let's say if you didn't like execute the right technique in a shot or something.
Yeah,
You can think about it. Just like go through what you should have done in order to improve.
that's it. Right? It's a phrase which instructs you in order to fix a problem or provide extra focus. And that would be when you've identified something wrong. If something's going wrong, instead of going, oh, I'm hitting it too low. Why am I hitting the 10 all the time? It's so annoying. And getting caught up in all of that. Talk to yourself and tell yourself how to fix it. Yeah? What to do better next time. So there's a clear difference, right? One gives you motivation, one gives you focus and instruction and helps you fix problems or guides you to completing an action correctly. And yeah, you would generally use instruction when you've identified that something's wrong. Generally use motivation when nothing's going wrong but you need a boost. You can also use a combination of the two. If I've identified a problem but you need a boost as well, use them both, you know. It's positive, there's nothing wrong with using the two of them, right? So here are some tips for being as positive as you can. What do you think I mean by the top two ones? So they're the same, right? You must be positive, you must not be negative. They mean the same thing. So why have I put it up there? What's the difference?
You kind of how they affect you.
Well, if you think about just negative thought, you I don't know.
Well, what's the difference in the sentences? So they mean the same thing. You must be positive, you must not be negative.
Well, the thought one's a positive statement, whereas the second one's a negative statement.
Right. Yeah. And in busy, intense situations, our brain just really takes the most important information. Right? Exactly. So if you say you must not be negative, what's your brain?
Negative thought.
Yeah, well, your brain, the last thing your brain hears is negative, but that's also an instruction that you don't want to do. So be negative, right? So you want to be clear and concise with the instructions that you give yourself, right? If you're on an airplane, the pilot comes out and he says, "Don't panic." What does everyone do? Because they hear panic. Something's wrong, right? But if a pilot comes out and he's like, "Relax," there might be some negative reactions, but generally it won't be as bad as him saying, "Don't panic." Right? There's a good example of this when I was working at Aberdeen Football Club, and one of the coaches asked me to observe them and give him feedback in the sports psychology perspective in terms of his communication with the players and things like that. And one thing that I noticed was he was doing this all the time. He was saying things that had positive meaning but were negative, like that second line there, the whole time, giving out instructions like that. Even though that was him communicating to others, it's the same if we talk to ourselves as well. And I told him and he didn't believe me, so I videoed it, and there was loads within 2 minutes. It was great. And you could really see how it was affecting the players to the point where there were 2 defenders in front of the camera. So I was filming behind, you could see him in front doing all this, and you could see 2 defenders in front of him, and he shouts, "Don't fall back." Right? Shouts, "Don't fall back," and what do the 2 defenders do? They go like this to go back and then realise and go forward, because it's all immediate reactions. Our brain just resonates with the last thing that we say and the most important pieces of the sentence as well. And the most important pieces of the top sentence is be positive or positive, and the second sentence is be negative or negative. So you want to keep it clear and concise. Does that make sense? So the second bit, avoid maybe, could, and might. Why do you think that that is there? Why do you think that that's important, that you should be avoiding maybe, could, and might?
Because they're in between. Like they're not like negative or positive.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's, if you say that to yourself, you're still kind of enforcing that there's a chance you might fail. So the 3 words at the bottom, can, am, will, there's no doubt there. And when you've got no self-doubt going into a situation, you can feel more confident, you can feel more positive, and you can feel more focused as well, which is great. Yeah. So we want to be, when we're talking to ourselves, whether it's motivational or instructional, always being positive, so providing clear instruction and using words like can, am, will that don't show any signs of doubt. Make sense? Yeah? Know the differences? Know when you would use them and things like that? Okay, so it's over to you. So on the sheet now, there's going to be 2 examples. Right? There's a situation, the negative thought you get in relation to the situation, and the reframe positive thought. Now, it's important that you do identify the negative thoughts. Why do you think that's important?
So you can understand where you have to make the changes.
So you can understand when, and where to make the changes. But also, we must also identify what we do say to ourselves, even if it is negative. So when it does happen, we don't give as much of a reaction, and it's easier for us to move on from it because we're almost expecting it. So it's important to identify what we do say to ourselves, even if it is negative. Because they're always going to be there, like I said. Over time, if you're more positive, You might not get as many negative thoughts after situations. You might just go straight to the positive, which is great. But there's always going to be times where you're negative straight away, and that's absolutely fine. It's just about what you do thereafter. Make sense? Easy. So, on you go. We'll get a couple of examples down, and we'll share our answers afterwards.
So just use examples that you've
So it can be hypothetical situations or situations that you've done in the past or you wish you reframed in the past. So it can be anything you want. So if you're doing two examples, it might be a good idea to do one motivational and one instructional. Or one with both as well, it's up to you. Sources?
Yeah.
Okay, what are some examples?
I put this is a motivational one from having game ball in a tiebreak situation and then losing the point and eventually the game.
Okay,
And then
so something that you need a good bit of motivation from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then negative thought of the day, like trying to make a mistake at this point
sure.
when you get game ball. But positive thought of the day, like you could do this, or you got this far in the game. So
That's good.
Like anymore.
And how do you think that that will then affect your feelings if you reframe it to that?
More motivated to like try and like win that point.
Absolutely. And if you hadn't have reframed and you'd stuck with that negative thought of what was it, try and not make.
Mistake,
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, well, you'd feel tight
Uh-huh.
and your actions would then eventually lead to mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I don't.
Go for it.
Making an easy mistake after creating a good opening / chance. Negative thought would be like, that was a shit shot, why did you even go for that?
Yeah,
As a positive would be, you created a good chance, just need to commit to this shot. I don't know.
That's good. Yeah. So it was kind of a combination of motivational and instructional there, which was good. I like it. Anyone else?
Yeah. Losing a long rally after you've put a long one.
Yeah.
So like, kind of these hits, like you might have a long rally, and you just make an easy mistake. Yeah, it can be quite demotivating because like you might be feeling a bit tired after putting up, and you might think that you've put a lot of work in kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Just like,
And that can be a really frustrating thing to feel if you feel like you've put so much work in and you feel like there's nothing there. And if you think about it like that, it's going to be a lot harder to move on from, because, well, if it's been a long rally, you'll have done things well, but if you just focus on it as a negative, then you'll go on just thinking about those negatives and not utilising what positives you have been doing well, you know. Good.
just like losing game balls, match balls.
Yeah.
Back to the point, how did I let it slip away? Just like trying to refocus. Think about the triangle back to how you got to there in the first place.
Nice. Yeah, so you're actually referring to the triangle itself. Which is, I think it is good because it's so easy to understand and it can make sense in any situation. I started working with an MMA fighter last year, and he was really, really negative, very down in himself. And we were working on similar things to this as well, and I showed him the cycle and we went through it in a few sessions, and he came back a week later and he had it tattooed up there. He had a sleeve of tattoos, though it wasn't just it in its own, but he had it tattooed up there because he said, yeah, whenever I started to feel down or whenever I was within an adverse situation, started to think about the cycle, and it made a difference. It's not just thinking about the cycle, but actively using it when you think about it as well. So yeah, that's really good, and good that you referred to the triangle.
First one was I never start the first match. I think kind of not feeling confident and think quite passive thoughts on court.
Yeah.
Kind of
What are the passive thoughts on court?
just kind of probably not going to win the match, and just kind of not trying, but just kind of let them
Sure.
play their game
Yeah.
and just kind of go on with what they're doing.
Mhm.
And all the thoughts, trying to think that I'm good enough to be on court with them. I try to do my own game.
Yeah.
Try to implement that rather than just letting them dictate
Sure.
what I was doing. And one was after creating pressure, doing a list drive. Nate thought was I can't hit a decent shot. I'm kind of just wasting all the pressure.
Yeah.
built up.
Yeah.
Paul's thought was that I know the right position to get in, so I just need to set up better next time.
Decent.
Kind of know what I have to do. It's just doing it.
That's good. Right, so all very good examples of reframing, either through motivation or instruction. Each is important as each other. It just depends on the situation itself, right? So from now, rather than just leaving this exercise here, you need to start using it. It's like anything. It's going to be difficult at first, where you might not have identified a negative thought and you're like, oh Jesus, right, okay, I've been on this negative cycle now and my negative thought was right at the start about 10 minutes ago, right? But over time, if you keep working on it and you keep trying to be aware of what you're thinking and how you're feeling, it gets easier and quicker. And when it gets easier and quicker, so for example now, I really am aware of when I think negatively. If I have a negative thought, I reframe it within a matter of 2-3 seconds. Doesn't take too long. It's not like I've gained that over years. It was just a few weeks of practice. But you guys have got really good opportunity because squash is a sport of adverse situations. So you can be doing it over and over, and it's not just in training and competition. If you do it with life in general, if you get a negative thought about anything, then you could be reframing that into a positive one. And the more that you do it, that's the more practice, so the quicker you'll get good at it. And the quicker you get good at it, the quicker it will help performance. Yeah? So I'd say the most important thing from now to begin with in terms of putting it into practice is identifying your negative thoughts. And then the next important part is reframing and choosing your positive thoughts in relation to the situation wisely. And try it out. Don't put pressure on yourself with it as well. You know? So don't go, oh my God, right, this happened, so just have fun with it and it will come naturally. But the most important thing is keeping on top of it, because if you try it out for a couple of training sessions and it's going okay, but you're not seeing too much of a difference, you don't just stop. Because you wouldn't do that with skills and techniques, because your coach is telling you that it's going to help your performance in the long run, but this point's about developing. It's exactly the same thing. You just keep on top of it as much as you can and you will see the benefits big time. Sound good?
Yeah.
So we've not got time for the other bit, but we'll do that in the next group session. If you've got any questions, all my details are there, and just get in touch. No worries. Right, okay, so when you go down, I don't know if you guys are going back onto the court, maybe not, but from now on, yeah, just try it out. Always be aware. It's even a good idea to note down just things like, I don't know if you guys have training logs or whatever, but writing down a couple of these after every training session just to keep on top of it. Coaches as well, you could be asking, right, what are you reframing to there if you see an adverse situation, just to keep the ball rolling with it as well. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay,
Practice.
sorted, no problem.